Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar in the series of Innovation Procurement in Practice. This webinar today is about risk management. We are happy to see so many of you present today. We have had over 275 registration, and I look very much forward to the presentations of today and the questions from the audience. Now, before we start, I would like to go through a little bit of housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is web streaming only, so there is 30 seconds delay. If you have questions, please use Slido. If you want to pose a question, please use your name and mention the person you would like to ask your question to. Very shortly, I would like you to know that we have a LinkedIn group where we post all information about our webinars. You find it in a link. All the people subscribed today will get these slides and the link to rewatch this webinar. The objectives. This is the code you can use for the Slido to log into the Slido. You go to Slido and fill in the code. The objectives of today's webinars are to learn about tools to manage risks in public procurement, specific risks related to the public procurement of innovation, and how the municipality of Amsterdam manages its risk. This meeting is divided in two parts. First, we will go through all the presentation by our speakers. And the second part, there will be question and answer sessions. Question and answer session where if you have any questions, you can pose them to the presenters. Okay, that was a short introduction, and let's just move on to the first presentation. You will see now on the screen the agenda of today. We have 3 presentations, then the question and answer sessions, and I will have some closing remarks as well. So I suggest not to lose time and quickly go into the first presentation. The first presentation will be given by Matthäus and Monica. They work for SME Legal in a law firm in Poland, and they are the winners of the European Innovation Procurement Awards 2021.
Runner-up.
Oh, the runner-up, sorry, yeah, I always confuse. But anyway, I will give you the floor because then you can introduce yourself properly. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Is our presentation visible at the moment? I hope it is. So we can just start.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome on the webinar on risk management. First of all, we would like to thank Anita and the whole DJ Grow team for inviting us and giving us the honor to open this great event with our short opening speech. We hope that you find it as inspiring and interesting. Few words about us. We are partners in the Polish law company SMM Legal. As such, we have been providing for last several years legal services to diverse entities from the R&D sector, such as foundation, government agencies, and networks of R&D institutes. We are very happy to share with you our experience gained from over a dozen proceedings for innovations. They were implemented both under the innovation partnership procedure based on the directive, as well as pre-commercial procurement procedures carried out on the basis of an exception under directive. With respect that public procurement is profoundly shaped by public regulations, our work is rather strategic than only legal support. We need to have a deep insight and a wide perspective to assist our public procurers in making the best choices. As Anita mentioned, our experience was appreciated in the European Innovation Council competition, European Innovation Procurement Awards. We were awarded second place in the category of public procurement leaders. Before we start, please note that each time when we say innovation procurement, we speak equally about the innovation partnership, pre-commercial procurements, and public procurement of innovation.
Our aim is that you will leave our part of the webinar with 3 major ideas. We will elaborate on them during our speech. First, you should know that innovation procurement, as any other procurement, involves multiple risks. Their number, scope, and intensity is just greater. Basically, it is a result of the specific factor, that is technological novelty, which is the main subject of the procurement. Secondly, in general, in public procurement, there are no zero-risk situations. But even if you cannot avoid risk, you can minimize the chance of its occurrence and its potential influence to the process. Dozens of innovation procurements launched in Europe show that it's the same in case of innovation procurement. You are able to classify the major risks, manage them, and continue the process. We have been there and know that in most of the cases is doable. Third, you must be aware that the high risk, high gain is legitimate innovation procurement. A moment, please. Thank you. After all, this situation, when you have this specific procurement, enables you to find novelty and the creation of the specific solutions. We want to underline that from our perspective, legal risks do not end at legal matters. All of the risks have high potential for legal relevance in their primary or secondary aspects. Based on our experience, we can indicate that the risk model of a public procurement in general is rather static. There are some defined groups of risk of operational, financial, and legal origin. In most of the cases, you're able to draw closed-end scenarios. If X occurs, then we will do Z. For example, if all of the offers will go beyond the budget, we will cancel the procurement or raise the budget. If the market operator goes bankrupt, we will replace him with his subcontractors. In innovation procurement, you face some additional groups of risks, naming the technical and the commercial risk as the main ones. Such additional groups of risks introduce a significant factor of unpredictability. This makes the risk model multidimensional and dynamic. It's not only a simple case to make a scenario, if the market operator has not reached the R&D targets within the first phase, we will cancel the project after it. You have to answer such questions, how to deal with situations such as the market operator has reached 80% of its targets, but the solution is still groundbreaking, or the results are thrilling, but they are not compliant with some national technical regulations from the 70s, or the market operator found during his research that his thesis was totally wrong, but he can prove that he will be able to do otherwise than initially planned with a small addition to the budget. The risk in innovation procurement interconnect along multiple axes, triggering not only primary risks, but also secondary, tertiary, etc. You see it on the graph on the screen. For example, state and public procurement compliance is a major and primary risk from the legal perspective, but you have also some secondary legal risks. For example, that the final shape of the solution may drag your market operator and his solution created for you into a patent war with one of the technological giants from outside of Europe. An example of tertiary risk, you have a secondary time and operational risk because the novel solution includes an aspect which requires to bypass a regulatory obstacle. In this case, you have a tertiary legal risk that the relevant authority will find the execution of the market operator's actions contrary to the law. As you can see, each risk in innovation procurement can come back with a secondary legal risk. Bottom line, you have new risks which may trigger multiple scenarios which basically are not foreseeable. So you have to introduce a dynamic risk management model with open-end problem solutions.
As Mateusz has pointed out, the additional risk in innovation procurement raised one question: how to foresee the unforeseen? From our legal and strategic perspective, the innovation procurement is a constant search for a balance between precision, transparency, and equal treatment of contractors, and following the unexplored path of the research process. It is extremely difficult to describe all the risks and obstacles related to conducting tender procedures for innovative contracts, but we will try to mention a few of the most important of them. First of all, it is essential to assess whether the innovation will be useful and meets the needs of potential users. For example, residents of the city, some group of society. As mentioned, it should be worth the candle. But on the other hand, we should also verify if our ambition is not too high, and thus if the risk don't go beyond the level of being acceptable from the perspective of the planned outcome. We need to try to balance ambition with a realistic approach. Another important issue is to evaluate the state of art and verify whether the innovation we intend to order is in fact innovative, especially in the meaning of public procurement law. This is critically important because the possibility of using, for example, the innovation partnership procedure under directive depends on the ordaining of novelty. It is also necessary to minimize the IP-related risks. In order to ensure proper examination of the above-mentioned issues, we suggest to conduct extensive preliminary market consultations because a dialogue with the market, potential contractors, scientists, experts, or recipients of innovation service products is the key to success. The preliminary market consultation should be, of course, transparent and equal for all interested potential contractors, according to directive. We cannot manage an innovative project without suitable staff, starting with experts and scientists, through people who know the market and its resources and production capacity, ending with creative and competent lawyers. In many cases, great benefits can be achieved by cooperation with other public partners who may be interested in implementing and co-finance our project. Joint efforts can scale up our results. Nevertheless, too many stakeholders can blow up the process, which will be discussed later. Another challenge is to find a balance between the precise description of the subject of the public procurement contract, which is required by the public procurement law, and its openness necessary to provide the contractor with creative freedom, which is oxygen for innovation. We should focus on a functional description of the subject of innovation and trying to avoid specific technical descriptions. Moreover, we should define only the minimum conditions to be met by the innovation. The more freedom for contractors, the better result we can expect. Another problem is to construct bid evaluation criteria that will allow us to select the most advantageous offer. The use of mathematical-based criteria is not always optimal for the process, although legally safe because of its transparency. If we are applying the less objective criteria, we should consider to use the panel of independent experts to ensure the equal treatment and avoid possible allegations of lack of objectivity. It is equally important to establish a suitable budget, taking into account especially the cost of research and development phase. We should also establish a reserve fund for unexpected expenses, taking into account the possible need to increase the contractor's remuneration due to inflation, R&D specific outcomes, supply chains break, or even armed conflicts or epidemics. It is essential to determine a sufficient time frame for the planned project, the tender itself, and the implementation phase. The review clauses could be crucial at this point. As we said, the innovation procurements are always at risk of failure. To minimize the risk, we can assume that we also be satisfied with a less groundbreaking innovation than we previously assumed, the innovation buffer. However, this innovation buffer must be known to all contractors from the beginning. Changing the contract is the one from the most important issue in innovation procurement. Long-term contract and specificity of research and development process are the main factors causing the need for change. Our advice is quite simple. The more review clauses in contract, the safer for the project. Let's imagine the worst scenario and find the potential solutions. Sometimes we have to accept the failure, for example, when better novelty appears on the market during our process. In order to be able to finish project without exposing ourselves to contractors' claims, we must introduce into the contract suitable provisions regarding termination of withdrawal from the contract. In summary, build internal competent human resources, rely on dialogue with the market, create as many reserve financial, operational, and legal scenarios as possible in a cascade of solutions.
Would like to share 2 case studies, including one failure and one success story. First is a road to nowhere story. The idea was that an improved zero-emission mean of transport is needed in Poland. The potential involvement of the market players requires the certainty to make it certain of the demand and the large scale of it. The choice was innovation partnership and creating a procurement group of 27 public entities, including a democratic approach that each of them has his voice with regard to the technical requirements. The size of the group was determined by the necessary market pool. The remaining conditions were based on the good practices from the R&D state aid framework. A profound technical and operational analysis, including several months-long market dialogue, was made. The baseline for the product and for the innovation was accepted. Despite the ambitious target price of the final product and the innovation involved, there was a market answer to the call. But after 2 years of the work, the project sank. What was the problem? The oversight of the procurement group and the democratic approach made particular product and price expectations of some of the major procurers not possible to be realized within the frame of the cooperation of 27 entities. The project ended up in a clinch situation and had to be cancelled. The second story is of an inspiring ambition, and this is a success story. The subject of the procurement was to create a system solution which would enable to transfer existing coal heating plants to 80% based renewable energy sources. The choice was a pre-commercial procurement ending in a demonstration made by the market operator. The remaining conditions were based on the good practices from the R&D state aid framework and an open-end model of risk management. The result? Phase 1 finished, mathematical model proving that even 90% renewable energy heating plant may be demonstrated has been verified. Demonstration is on the way. Bottom line, the innovation procurement may fail due to simple operational reasons. On the other hand, the answers to vast problems which the market may give you are mind-blowing. Using this opportunity, we would like to make 2 proposals to be considered by the honorable participants of this webinar as a start for a public discussion on facilitating public procurers to use innovation procurement. First of all, we believe that it would be valuable if the European Commission, as an outstanding promoter of innovation procurement and a great authority in this field, would create a frame model of processing innovation procurement, plus a change in the directive and the R&D framework. If the managers of the public procurer would follow such model in good faith, irrespective of the outcomes of the innovation procurement, they would be deemed exculpated from any personal liability.
The second idea, which could make the innovation procurement more elastic and resistant to external unforeseen factors, is to introduce some changes to public procurement rules. Currently, any significant changes to the public procurement contract are prohibited, and only those resulting from regulations or review clauses in the contract are allowed. This is precisely indicated in the Procurement Directive and emerges from the argumentation of the Court of Justice and the European Union on the general rules applicable in case of directive-free procurements. In our opinion, in the case of innovation procurement, the rules should be reversed in such a way that any amendment to the contract should be allowed unless it is expressly prohibited by the directive. limited catalog of forbidden changes of the contract would be clearer and safer for participants of innovations public procurement. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll be very happy to answer any question you may have. We encourage you to ask questions, which will be answered during the Q&A session.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Matthijs and Monica, for your very clear elaboration on the legal risks of innovation procurement and your elaboration on mitigating measures. Procurement of innovation, you need to learn how to risk. You say it's worth it. I agree. And we need also to know how to manage these risks. So let's go now to our follow-up presentation because Jan Dekker of the City of Amsterdam is here. He's a risk advisor to the City Council and to the City Board. And he will take us on a journey through how the city manage its risks in general. So I will give now the floor to Jan Dekker to introduce himself further and help us understand better what it is to manage risk on this level. Jan Bart, are you there? I will give the floor to you. Hello.
Unmuted now.
Yes, yeah,
hello.
Can you also put on your video? Oh, okay, you're on. You're on. Great, you can start.
I'm both on audio and video. Okay, thank you very much.
And your slides are on the screen right now.
Okay, that's great. That's the first slide. We'll stick with that for a couple of for some time. So my name is Jan Dekker. Just like Anita has told, I am an advisor to the City Council. With regards to risk management, particularly on the financial risk management side, I advise mostly the element of finances, but also on larger projects, and that's where most of our procurement, substantial procurement takes place. And in that case, it's not as such the finances, more or less the all the risk involved, so legal, operational, and so on and so on. I'm going to do this presentation in a couple of partitions. First of all, I want to give you a little sense on the City of Amsterdam itself and the governance there. And I want to do that because risk management, in a sense, is about governance and about good governance. And if I can take you back to all the risks that Monica Matthijs has said and told you, I think they are very recognizable. Deal with them is to have a good governance structure in place because you cannot foresee all the unforeseen. It's impossible, but you can put in place a structure to deal with them when they come along. So that's why I will touch the subject of governance first. And also, before I go there, I want to tell you something about the City of Amsterdam, because that's the context in which we operate as a municipality. And which is also very, how we say, guiding on our risk management framework. So can you give me the second slide, please? Anita? Yes, thank you very much. Okay, just some general facts on the City of Amsterdam. It is the capital city of the Netherlands. It's in a population of about 900,000 people. And it's expected to grow to over 1 million within 10 years from now. We've got 450,000 residences for these people to live in, so that should be fairly enough. However, it's absolutely not enough to accommodate any growth, so there's a lot of tension on the housing projects. Well, with housing projects comes, of course, all the other questions that we have in terms of mobility and investments that we have to do in our public spaces and in our public transportation and also in our private transportation. Another good thing to see is that our labor force is 585, 600,000, something like that. So that's more labor force than people that actually live in Amsterdam. That means that also a lot of people come to Amsterdam. And it's more and more by the year. So we really have to make sure that our infrastructure is in place to accommodate for this great influx on a daily basis as well. What else do we have to say about it? Well, what you can see is that the population density is quite high. It's above 5,000 people per square kilometer. It's one of the densest populated areas in the Netherlands and probably in the world as well. And another nice thing, if you see on the chart below, you see that the population actually, well, how would you say that, renews itself every 11 years. There's a big influx of people, and certainly the last couple of years, most of that influx of people came from abroad, meaning that our city is very culturally diverse. Practically all the nationalities of the world have some representation in the city of Amsterdam. Can I go to the next slide, please? So all that needs to be governed, and I want to take you a little bit with me on the government in general in the Netherlands. We've got a central government which actually decides on all the stuff which needs to be centrally decided upon, but also doles out all the finances, which I'll come back later. It's a tiered structure in the Netherlands, so we got the provinces. The provinces are mostly concerned with spatial planning and interstate traffic and things like that. And then you've got the municipalities, the water authorities, and intergovernmental partnerships. And Amsterdam is, of course, one of the municipalities. There are about 350 of them in the Netherlands. And then we've got about 15 water authorities, give or take some, which make sure that we are safe for water. And then we've got intergovernmental partnerships. There are not a lot of them because they are democratically not very sound partnerships in a case, because there's no direct election of people representing in those partnerships. But two of them are of big importance, and one of those partnerships is in the Amsterdam area concerning all the public transportation around Amsterdam and with the connecting cities around it. And a lot of investment and all the stuff that we do comes out of these partnerships. Can I go to the next slide, please? So this is a bit of a model which I took from a stress test that was conducted by the Bonn University in conducted by the Bonn University, but ordered by one of the Ministry of Umweltforschung or Spatial Planning in Germany. And I found it a very nice picture to see how a city functions, because it's pretty basic, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done if you take it away. First of all, people live in a city. So that's the left part, that little house there, wonen. In order to live there, you need a certain level of facilities, including healthcare, but also education, but also shops, things like that. And then people work there. And all of these functions are connected, interconnected. So one investment in living, for instance, also means investing in the stuff needed for people to actually live in a city or to work in a city, or transport and mobility. That's why I'm focusing on that. All takes place with a sense of the quality of our living environment and also the social structure of the city, stedelijkheid, integratie, and that has to be governed. And that's what we do on a municipal level. And in order to do that, we are organized. We've got about 17,000 people working at the City of Amsterdam in the organization. Most of the people are working in the social domain, meaning that they will dole out the health benefits, but also income support, things like that. Then we've got a very large department on city planning and economy. This is where most of our procurement takes place, in those two parts. And then, of course, the things that you can imagine, like public services and information, urban management and operations. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about revenue and also at spend later, because the procurement levels relate, of course, to the money that we come in. So that gives you a little bit of an idea on the how we say the largeness of procurement, specifically in innovative procurement projects. First of all, the revenue is somewhere between the 5 billion and 7 billion, depending on what you count as real revenue and whatnot. But let's take the 7 billion, and then you can see that on the left-hand side, almost half of it comes from our central government. So they will give it to us in order for us to spend on all the stuff that we need to keep that functioning of the city. And then we've got our own income. And our own income comes primarily from tourism. Before Corona, there was a lot more than that's right now, but you see a lot of veering back to normal levels. But also car parking is a very large amount of money that comes in, and local taxes like taxes on real estate. And then the other part, which you see on the right-hand side, this is basically where we are very, very busy, which is land development and land lease. So erfpacht, land lease, and land development. So you can see there are quite substantial amounts of income coming in, and dividends from companies that we own as a city. So next slide, please. Unfortunately, we spend it all. So basically, on a municipality level, what I want to give to you as a good information is that we can only spend the money that we actually have as a revenue, as an income. It's for us impossible to borrow money for operational expenses. The only exception, of course, if we do an investment, and that's where the most of our procurement takes place, our big procurement in the investment side. But very different from a central government, which is perfectly capable of borrowing money to spend. In our case, it is prohibited by law. So we are very much bounded by a balancing of revenue and spend. That's a good thing to remember. Next slide, please. And here we come to finally probably some figures which are really in your comfort zone. The procurement figures. I split them out in two groups. One of them, I would say, is the normal, how would you say, year-on-year procurement level. As you can see, a lot of them is in the civil engineering, which concerns all kinds of projects in the open space that we need to do. The other one is in the social domain, and we've got many, many tasks which were formerly from the central government now decentralized to the municipality, which means that we have to contract now certain parties actually to perform those services in the social domain. We were used to, how would you say that, do subsidies, but in these cases, most of the stuff comes from procurement and contracts. And that's quite an innovative thing that happened to the social domain in Amsterdam. And then there's some on operational expenses like, how would you say, garbage trucks, things like that. And also ICT spend, which is always quite substantial. But nevertheless, as you can see, most of those procurement levels are actually dwarfed by our projects. So that's where we'll focus on when we talk about risk management later on. To give you an idea, the current pipeline, or not the pipeline, actual project that we're working on, the budget is about 4.5 billion. And it was a lot higher. It's 4.5 billion. It's going to be a lot more because prospectively, we were looking at about 6, maybe even 7 billion procurement levels, mostly related to the metro systems, which we will expand due to the developing of the city as well. I mean, this we're looking to expand, and we still need to find the funding there. So here comes in place again the governance of all these large amounts, and specifically when it comes to projects. We are governed by the city council, which has an oversight of, like I say, we are governed by the mayor and aldermen, which are governed by the city council. these people are no experts on these projects, which immediately would indicate a lot of risk. However, they are experts on public value because that's what they were elected for. That's where they look at the public value that they seek to achieve with a project, and hence the procurements which are underneath that. These people are mostly not the people that actually initiate these projects. So it's either the organization that initiated or some third party which thinks, look at here, I've got a very nice project for you guys. And there's a tension between public value and project scope, because what you will procure will need a definite project scope, and the governance, the public governance around it will always seek, is the public value actually served by the scope chosen here? So that's where the tension is. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is risk management. This is why I was asked to tell you some things about how we go around that in the organization of in Amsterdam. Can you put on the next slide, please? First of all, what I would like to talk about is that the organization itself has got a risk management system in place. As I said, we are 17,000 people. We've got a lot of activities going around. Some of them are procurement, so our risk management is not specifically geared to procurement. It is there, of course, but it is part of a bigger framework. And this framework I try to explain here. We talked a little bit on governance, which is on the top side of this chart. So on the left side, you see the municipal council, who does the budget allocation and sets the risk management framework and control of the board of mayor and aldermen. And the municipal council will never directly involve themselves in the order of business. That's what the board of mayor and aldermen do. They do the day-to-day management, and they prepare those decisions and also oversee the execution. And they themselves are always subject of control by the municipal council. Then on the right-hand side, you see the execution part of, and that's where all those 17,000 people are sitting. Some of them are in the first line. We divide them in 3 lines. The first line actually prepares the decisions, are the owners of the risk that comes with those decisions, and they're also responsible for controlling the risk. Insofar they are capable of doing something, because they're not always capable of doing such a thing. Then we got a second line. A second line is primarily also where my function resides. We prepare those frameworks, we do some control, and we do some advising work. And we are with a lot of people as well with specific specialties. So we've got legal people. I worked with Anita, for instance, she on the legal side and myself on the risk side on bigger projects. And we do some advising there. But there's also people very much involved with integrity. There are people involved with ICT knowledge, with environmental knowledge, all kind of people which are not directly part of the project or the procurement, but are on the second line giving some advice from a specialist's perspective. And then there's the third line, which we call the internal audit. They are always too late. But the fact that they're there makes sure that people really are looking for their shop, not for them to point out weaknesses. Sometimes they do, and that's why they are the third line, because when they pointed them out, we can do something about it. So there's a learning perspective there. So that's on the who. Then we got the what. I talked about framework. We'll do that on the next slide. But first, I would also talk about the products that we have to inform those municipal council and board of mayor and aldermen. And that's done through a planning and control cycle, so the budget and annual reports, and also through a scenario analysis and stress testing specifically on risk. So this is the way they are informed. On top of that, when it comes to specific projects, which are in the larger sizes, they get their own reporting also as part of a system of making decisions. Now, how do we do it? As I said, we have advisories, we've got risk workshops, brainstorm sessions, reports and dashboards. fact sheets, and so on, and manuals. And that's all part of the decision-making process per specific business line. Like we said, we've got some social domains, we've got some physical domains, we've got all kinds of domains. Every one of them has got a certain specific decision-making process on projects. So next slide, please. When we get to the framework, there is a risk management policy, and which the the risk appetite of the municipal council and the board of aldermen and mayor and aldermen actually stated, and is also a policy to make sure that we are capable of operating under most circumstances. So not just the normal circumstances, also stress circumstances like we have had with Corona, and we also are facing now a little bit with the Ukraine crisis and influx of people into our city. There's a policy in place. That's a governing policy, and underneath them there are several policies also for those specific specialist areas in social domains and physical domains. Then we've got, if we go one block down, the ISO 31000, meaning that as a policy we have stated that every aspect of risk management is organized according to the guidelines of ISO 31000. That's the International Standards Organization, which you probably are well aware of. And the 31000 standard is about effective risk management. Then, in order to support those guidelines out of the ISO 31000, we've got risk systems. We've got a general risk system to consolidate all the risks that we see in our normal order of business, but also in those projects. And then we've got project-specific risk systems, and we've got all kinds of procedures that make sure that the information which is on risk emanates at the executive level, rolls up, and is being reported. And therefore, we've got a base to do our advising on as well. And then there's these large projects on the top right. This is where most of the procurement is in. This is also where most of the innovation takes place. And we've got a specific regulation for these large projects. Just to give you an idea, we do about 700 projects at any time, and only 12 of them are governed by this specific regulation. Those 12 are really big projects. As I said, they are now in the amount of 4.5 billion. And they take about 70% of all the project budgets that we have. So how do you get your project in there? Well, if it's large in financial terms, if it's large in organizational complexity, and also in political sense, how would you say, now controversy is not the right word, but how to say, it's spannend, exciting. And of course, also when we are engaging in projects which are really new in terms of technology or in terms of ways in which we contract. And when there's innovation in there, you usually immediately apply for being under that specific regulation. So what happens if you get under there? Next slide, please. If you look here at our slide, on the top, it's unfortunately in Dutch, but I'll take you through. This is where the decision-making process takes place, a pictorial on the decision-making process. So first of all, like I said, the public value has been set by the municipal council, and from there they are looking for solutions that possibly incorporate also innovation. Then at some point in time, they will have some market consultations. They will they put together a project plan, and they will go for their decision-making step at that point in time. Usually a lot of time passes before you get there, and my experience is the longer you take before your decision, the better it is for the execution. That is our experience in the Netherlands or in Amsterdam. So what is the objective of this regulation? Well, if we go for such a large project, it is to ensure that there's a proper dialogue between the administration, so that's the public council, and also the executive part, so that we truly understand what it is that we are going to achieve with this project, what the risks are, what the benefits are, if there are any alternatives, things like that, so that you can really go through this dialogue together. And why do we need a regulation? Well, that has to do with the conflict of interest between the initiative taking people, which really do want to make a project, and the people that actually have to decide on it, which say, well, the true cost of a project is all the money that I have to spend on it that I cannot spend on all the other stuff that I want to do. So there's a lot of tension there, and therefore it's good that we have a structured dialogue, and that's what the regulation for large project does. When is it applicable? I already told you, when it's a big project, and when it's also new to our organization, when it's innovative, because the project itself might be pretty well managed. The whole organization around it will really have to actually understand it and put it to good use. The criteria we talked about, and then it's the points of attention that we have once you're in the regulation. People in the second line, like myself, and like the legal people, and like people which are really political advisors, they organize themselves and take an integral view on the quality of the project management and the risk management at several stages, at the startup stage, but also at the continuing stage. And then they are flagging if it is within the reasonable thresholds from our risk appetite, or if we say, no, some other things need to be done to make sure that it stays there. We also focus very much from these people to the quality of information provided to our decision makers. And then there's the other thing that we really do is the stakeholder management. We really make sure that it's not just the project, its scope and its goal, which is being attained, but that there's plenty enough attention for actual people involved, not really directly with the project, but which are touched by the project's outcome. And if you can see on the pictorials on the left side, this is how on the top left side you see how we used to do big metro projects. We just slammed all those houses on top of them, and then we sunk these the tunnel pipes underneath. This is not a way to conduct projects anymore. This is the way we did it in the 70s. Then we decided to do it differently. We started to do it like the Swiss and the Austrian people do, and the mountainous people do. They would start drilling those projects, which is the North-South line, which we did. But then still, it's something that you have to take in mind. If you put this amount of people, project, and machinery in a living environment, a working environment of a city, that does something with those people there, and also does something with the support of the projects. Therefore, the stakeholder management is very, very important. And the last thing that I'd like to touch with you is that once a project is under this regulation, they are obliged to organize what we call tegenspraak, which is a kind of organized opposition. In the case that what we do, we invite people who have a good understanding of the project, because probably they did it somewhere else, like in a different city or in a different country, but they don't have any commitment to the project. So they can really give expert advice without being tied to the outcome that the project manager would want to have it. And therefore, it would limit tunnel vision. I think I can conclude my presentation here. And well, happy to answer questions, if any, in the Q&A section later.
Yes, Jan-Bart, thank you very much. Very interesting, giving us this unique insight in an operational side of the city that most of us do not read about every day on the news, but probably we read about the outcomes, how well it's done in the news about sometimes. My takeaways from your presentation is that there needs to be a governance in place to manage risks. It's about balancing the financial side against the public value of the money you're going to spend. And in large projects is the biggest bite of the procurement money, and therefore the risk management system concludes mostly big projects like that. Well, you can correct me later if I'm wrong and I understood it not correctly, but it was very interesting. So now we go to the third speaker of today, because we go a little bit more deeper into the specific risks related to innovation procurement. And I want to invite Ville and also his colleague Matti, both senior scientists at VTT Helsinki Uusimaa in Finland, to tell us a little bit about the research they did. So Ville, are you ready to give your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, then we go over to you.
Thank you. Hopefully my presentation will be visible now. So,
yeah,
hello
your
everyone.
presentation is visible now, so you can start.
Excellent. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ville Valovirta, senior scientist at VTT Technical Research Center, and together with my colleague Matti Piilajamaa, we'll be presenting some results from a recent study we've done. So we are glad to share some exciting results from this work that we've just completing now. So what we did is an inventory of risk management and risk sharing mechanisms and practices regarding novel solutions and new technologies, basically innovation procurement. We did a literature review. We we made case studies on 7 successful innovation procurement cases, and then we scanned some international practices. And the report makes some conclusions and recommendations about risk-sharing instruments, both for the contracting entities, but also for the policy support functions. So we've been looking at how the procurement bodies can manage risks, but also we've been looking at how the government and policy support organizations can share those risks and reduce risks by different types of mechanisms. And this was an assignment for the government of Finland within their activities. So what we did is that we looked at 5 types of risks. First, we looked at the object of the procurement, basically meaning that when we are doing innovation procurement, the product or service to be procured is innovative. It has novel features. It's maybe applying new technology. So there is higher uncertainty involved with that, especially if there's development of the new solution involved within the procurement contract. The outcome of that development work is uncertain. So there's risks are involved there. And these risks might be regarding technical performance, quality, and various other types of aspects. So that's the most important risk that we are dealing with when engaging in innovation procurement. The second class is that we also looked at the risks that are associated with the suppliers. There's a number of risks, sort of conventional risks there, but especially with innovation procurement, we are often keen on engaging small companies, SMEs, startup companies, and there's an issue about their specific capacity to deliver goods and services and perhaps a continuity of their business. Thirdly, there are risks that are related to the procuring organization themselves, especially when the solution is new. There are issues related to integration of new technology, new solutions in existing work practices, existing technical systems, how the interfaces are organized, and how the users are accepting the new solutions. Fourthly, when conducting innovation procurement, we might be using more complex procurement models, and this requires different types of competencies from the procuring body. There might be a need to use functional requirements or performance-based specifications, how to manage intellectual property rights, how to manage different types of legal risks, and there's of course also the question of the potential legal complaints coming from the supplier side. And fifthly, there are risks related to the markets. So the sort of wider demand. If there's an innovation procurement taking place, it is uncertain whether there will be broader demand for the new products and how this market will be forming up. So it's related to the diffusion of innovation, and also to, especially in the digital space, we are also looking at the complementing products, whether they are given room. So as we can see, there are a number of issues here when looking at different types of risks. Here are the 7 case studies we looked into in detail. These were all successful cases, and we're spanning from waste to energy power plant to digital health in home care, to autonomous transportation services, wastewater sludge treatment, energy efficient school building, social outcomes contract for child welfare, and interseasonal heat energy storage in the municipal energy production. And some of the key findings that we can see from here in looking at these cases is that first, there were, in most of the cases, there clearly were technical risks involved with a novel solution, new technology, new product, new process involved. And these risks that were associated with the application of new technology and new functionalities were pretty well understood, and they were also sort of purposefully taken. So the procurement bodies were very well aware that there are these risks, and they had active effort. They made active efforts in managing those risks, and the most part were also successfully able to do so. The second point is that there were clear benefits from innovation. The positive impacts accepted from these procurements that were put in balance to the higher risks, which were the potential negative impacts from innovation. So it's clearly a sort of balancing issue, not only that innovation brings more risks, but actually innovation brings potential benefits, but at the same time you have high risks. So it's about how to balance this relationship between the benefits and the negative impacts. One of the approaches that we saw in different types is the application of procurement models, which are using a distinct development phase. So a couple of the cases were using innovation partnerships. There was one applying the pre-commercial procurement approach, and in the construction space, there were a few projects using sort of integrated project delivery models, and then we had this one social outcomes contract. And all these cases are sort of pointing out that one of the key tools to manage risks is to split the procurement and the project in distinct phases and evaluate each outcome of the phases, and in that way to manage the risk that the process can be terminated in case the risks are, if the outcomes are not meeting the expected targets. Another aspect is that almost all of the cases, there were public funding for risk sharing involved. This was not something that we were particularly using as a selection criteria for our cases, but nevertheless, I think in 6 out of 7 cases, there was some sort of external funding used for sharing those risks. And this is a quite interesting indication that procuring bodies are very willing and they want to share the risks with the government or perhaps an EU funding source. And then final point from here is that there are the obvious market risks related to the emergence of demand for the novel technology. And in most of the cases, it was not at all clear that the innovation would start immediately diffusing to a larger market. So there's a number of risks that we are seeing there, how to create the larger diffusion scale up for these innovations. I will speak a little bit about that in the end of my presentation. And then looking at the risks, we can also apply a perspective of different types of parties in these procurement processes. First, we are typically looking at the risks perceived by the procurers. And procurers are perceiving the uncertainty related to the performance, quality, and functionality with regard to the user needs of the new solution, new product, or new service. They are also, of course, weighing the potential impacts from this innovation to public service improvement. So this meaning that the innovative product or solution that is being procured is expected to bring some clear benefits to public service improvement. But because it is a novel product, novel solution, it is not at all clear whether these impacts will materialize or not. So those are the risks. And then thirdly, the integration with existing systems and processes. There are a number of issues there that are quite significant as well. But we shouldn't forget also the fact that when we are looking at innovation, there's always the perspective of the suppliers as well. And the suppliers are keen of creating new business, new commercial sales. So for them, the biggest risk is that especially if they are engaging in innovation procurement where they are actually investing themselves in product development within the contract, there's always the uncertainty of the demand and the future market for those innovative products and solutions as return for investments to this innovation. So this relates to particularly very much about the IPR issues, how to allocate the rights between the buyer and the supplier in a way that maximum incentives are given also to suppliers to get return on investments. And then finally, also there are risks perceived by the society. This is the case especially when governments or EU is supporting innovation procurement with various means, perhaps providing grant funding to share those risks. from the society's point of view, there is the risk that if the innovative solutions will not scale up and start diffusing, these broader social and economic impacts will not be attained. And the expected impacts can be related to public service improvement, as well as the economic impacts from the market creation for new products and services. So both for the buyer to improve services, but also for the suppliers, if they get new revenue, perhaps on the export market, that can bring large economic impacts. So these are the risks that particularly for innovation policymaker, they are very much very important. So now I will move to the practical risk-sharing tools and approaches that we were able to identify in this study. There were 4 classes of tools. First, information and collaboration. Secondly, procurement models. Thirdly, contractual tools. And then fourthly, economic means. Starting with information and collaboration. On the left-hand side, you can see the tools that the procuring bodies have at their use. There are quite obvious approaches here, such as foresight, doing market analysis, engaging the market, consulting through market dialogue, and also collaboration during contract implementation stage in the post-award phase. So these are quite obvious things, but cannot be overemphasized that this is the time in this early stage of the procurement process where you can really influence the prospects of risks in an early stage with quite simple tools, allocating enough time, engaging competencies, and doing analysis, engaging the market and so forth. The government on the right-hand side can also use various policy instruments and support measures, supporting research and impact assessments, conducting technology testing and verification, promoting collaboration on standards, supporting collaboration between the buyers to share risks among various procuring bodies, and then also providing test environments such as research facilities or perhaps regional platforms for innovation, such as opening a particular city district for testing and piloting and experimentation. Secondly, there are a number of procurement models that seem particularly suited for innovation procurement in a way which manages risks. As I said earlier, there are a number of phased approaches, such as the PCP model, innovation partnership, or procuring, piloting stage only services, or in the construction and infrastructure, there are integrated project delivery models. And also outcomes-based contracting can be used as a tool to share and mitigate risks. The government can provide support, particularly through various capacity building efforts, and disseminate best practices about application of these models in the best possible manner. Thirdly, there are contractual tools. First and foremost, intellectual property rights are very important, especially when the contract involves development of a new solution. It is absolutely necessary to allocate the intellectual property rights in a manner which provides incentives for both parties to get the best out of the procurement. A good rule of thumb, of course, is to give the IP rights to the suppliers, the maximum amount, which is a recommended policy these days. But of course, there are provisions that can be made also to retain IPR for the procuring organization in some cases as well. The procuring entities can also use performance incentives to provide the suppliers maximum reasons to innovate, and using contract terms which incentivize the suppliers to innovate during the contract period, using together with functional requirements and performance-based specifications to try to procure in a way where you basically design the outcomes that you want from the procurement, and not so much dictating the particular technical solution involved. And then in the digital solutions procurement, there are data interface requirements that can be used. These are very important, especially with the digital solutions that have the tendency to create unnecessary or unwanted situations with vendor lock-in, and also with high costs of integration with complementary systems. So by using open data interfaces, the procuring body can mitigate the risks involved with these kinds of situations. The governments can support through setting procurement regulation, providing contract templates, and setting different types of standards. And then finally, the economic means. The procuring entity can make risk allocations and create risk reserves or buffers, as were mentioned earlier today already. And then there are a number of financial support instruments covering different stages of the procurement process, starting from the grants for procurement planning, such as innovation vouchers or different types of support funding for the procuring bodies. There's also instruments in different countries, and also from the EU for pre-commercial procurement support. There are also support available, at least in our country, in Finland, for sharing the risks for solution development phase, for instance, within innovation partnership type of procurements. And then fourthly, there are also available funding for the investment stage, although this is seems to be on the basis of our scanning of the market, seems to be quite diffuse and scattered, but especially in different sectoral policies, such as energy support or transportation, there are also support available for first of a kind risks deployment for new types of technical solutions. And then finally, interesting instrument that is not very well or very widely used, but we found a couple of examples in few countries, some sort of risk guarantee mechanisms that can be agreed between the buyer and the supplier, perhaps with a third-party guarantor, to mitigate the risks in case some technical risks are actually materializing. So to summarize this presentation, The first point, that risk management in innovation procurement is very much about comprehensive balancing of risks and benefits from innovation. There's no one tool that is a silver bullet, but rather it is a comprehensive approach that needs to be looked throughout the whole process. And there's a number of collaborative, contractual, and financial means available to reduce, transfer, share, and mitigate those risks. And then finally, that with various policy instruments and support measures, governments can share these risks of innovation development and adoption with those procurers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ville, for this very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for sharing the outcomes of your research with us as a wider audience. I think it was very insightful. And also your ideas how to help buyers performing procurement of innovations are very interesting to me. So this webinar will last till 12:30. We have good 20 minutes still available for questions and answers. So that's good because then we can have some interaction. My colleague Anna Lupi is here to help me and will pick and read questions. And I would like to invite especially the audience not to be shy. We still have 20 minutes. So if there is a burning question and you think, oh, probably not important, just pose it. So because we have still some time. So I will now go over to Anna, who has picked some questions. Could you read them and maybe also suggest the person who can answer it?
Thank you, Anita.
No, it's not on.
Thank you, Anita. The first question is maybe more of a general one, so probably it's for all the speakers. And it's basically, what are the risks of managing such advanced methods without well-written guidelines and proper capacity development addressing both procurers and the market as well? Risks in initiating and negotiating such methods with competitive dialogue?
Yes, so maybe we can do the order that Ville, Jan Bart, and Monica Omatees give their view on this question. So Ville, I will give first the floor to you, and then Jan Bart can follow, and then one of the Monica Omatees.
Yes, thank you. If I understand correctly, the first part of the question about the risk of managing such advanced methods without well-written guidelines and proper capacity development. Well, the answer, I'm afraid, is quite obvious, that the risk is, of course, that it doesn't go very well, that there are different types of hiccups in the process as such. So I believe that the efforts that we are seeing in both at the EU level and also in many member countries, that there are more and more guidelines coming up and different types of capacity building efforts. I think it's really, really essential. At least our experience from Finland is that the procuring bodies are extremely grateful for all kinds of material, all kinds of guidance. Sometimes it's a very, very, very simple question about particular criteria, use of particular criteria or particular legal paragraph. But sometimes it's very fundamental issues about how to go about with the whole procurement process, how to structure it, what should we actually be buying, how to draw the boundaries around the object of procurement. And this is of course much goes beyond any simple guidelines and requires maybe advisory and even consultation to do so. But at least my response would be that that we need a whole range of support from very simple, responsive, and guidelines and capacity building efforts, and also sharing between the procuring bodies of experiences and best practices, but also we need more in-depth expertise in really conducting and structuring procurements.
So, okay, thank you for your answer, Jan Bart. Could you share your answer to this question?
Yep. Well, very short. The risk of such a thing is that the people that take this initiative without these proper guidelines and proper capacity are very much tempted, I would say, not at all in a strategic representation of the figures that they put forward. So you have to be very, very alert to these situations. And it brings me back to my earlier point, is that what you need to do is make sure that you've got a good governance in place to take the decision. And what I mean with that is that the people that are involved in this governance are not just their roles are clear, but also that their behavior is that they act within the expectations of good governance. And I mean the expectations of the public on good governance. So this is a very ethical thing to integrate into the procurement process in this case. But preferably you would only go in there if you have the proper guidelines in place and a proper capacity. But if it's not possible, if you really have to solve your problems along the way, make sure that you've got your governance correctly set up.
Very, very clear. Thank you. Monica or Matthijs, who would like to take the floor to answer this question?
Thank you. I'll take this one. Please bear in mind that the European Commission has published its communication from the 2007, which is the basics of the pre-commercial procurement, but it's also useful for other innovative procurement, so the PPI or the innovation partnership. Secondly, there's a aged European Assistance for Innovation Procurement initiative toolkit, which is very valuable for the basics of risk management and for the preparations of the innovation procurement. Despite the time which has passed from its publishing, it's still accurate, in my opinion. It's a very good basis to prepare proper guidelines for each organization. But finally, the basic guidelines for making innovation procurement to the organization should be made by the proper organization itself, because it should be aligned with its proper risks and the product which is which is seeking within this innovation procurement process.
Thank you very much. Then we go to the next question. Anna?
Yes, this is a question for Jan from Juan, who asks, how should policymakers treat the subject of risk management? Can they just leave it in the hands of procurement bodies, or should they get involved on risk management themselves on the buying and the implementation process?
This is a two-tier answer, I would say, because the procurement bodies have the procedural knowledge and mostly also the technical knowledge of putting a proper procurement process in place. So they should not be actively involved with that process. However, they should be very much involved in the actual decision-making process on which this procurement takes place. Meaning that they should be actively involved in asking the right questions. And questions are, for instance, if some kind of new innovative project is being proposed, you first ask, okay, did anyone anywhere in the world did a similar thing? What was their budget at that time? Did they achieve it on that budget, or did they have huge cost overruns? And why is this project differently? So this is the way to be actively involved without prior knowledge in a decision-making process at the start of it, before you make the decision. And once you have decided to take the step forward with the actual procuring and engaging in the project, you should be involved. You should, in a sense that you receive the information and that you are able to ask the questions, if only it was for the project itself to feel that they are busy for the public case and not as much for the project scope, because that's the first thing they will do. They will go for project scope. And you really need to make sure that the public value to be achieved and the project scope are continuously in place, because as other people also said, during the project, it will evolve. It might morph into quite a different version from what it is that you have decided upon. So you have to be there and you have to be involved there. That's my answer, I think.
Thank you, Jan. The next question is for Monica. In the innovation partnership, dialogue with the market is crucial. What are the best tools to achieve a clear understanding of the market to lower the risk? What policy tools could be implemented to do this both locally and at EU level?
Well, first of all, as we mentioned before, we need a great team. And these human resources are crucial. So we have to have people who understand the market and who can talk with the market. And we need, of course, advisors, scientists, lawyers, because this dialogue should be on different levels, should be conducted on different levels. So I think it's crucial, and of course the legal framework of this preliminary market consultations are in directive. So I don't think that we should need some policy tools, special policy tools for just conducting this kind of dialogue. I don't know, Mateusz, would you like to add something, maybe?
Yes, if it's possible, I would like to add one thing. I think that there's a great knowledge among the whole society of public procurers concerning the information from the preliminary technical dialogue that you receive during your consultation in each case. I think that it would be valuable if such information received from particular procurers would be shared possible on a platform. So other procurers, before starting their proper technical dialogue, can verify if somebody else didn't recently check this technical aspects, financial aspects of specific innovation process. So there's a lot of knowledge which could be used, which was gathered by other public procurers, and it may be very useful both on the local and EC level. The European Commission can be a promoter of such initiatives.
Yeah, actually, I want to add that currently we are working on such a platform to promote that. So that's in action. But we will go to the next question because that would be off topic today.
And the next question is also for the colleagues from Poland. Nicola asks if you can explain in detail why the innovation procurement failed, in particular the one with the 26 contracting authorities.
Okay, thank you. I'll also take this one. Please excuse us, but we can only share those information which are publicly known, either published by the procurer himself or by the controlling authorities who have published a report on this case. But in general, the problem was that it was one of the first initiatives concerning innovation partnership. So it had to make some incentives to the public procurers not having experience in innovation procurement. So their primary condition was that they want to have some holding on the rules concerning the technical shape of the product. But when the project emerged, there were several other things that they have some concern about, the financial aspects, etc. And they just put a brake on the technical aspects, holding the possibility to accept the technical specification of the product. So in theory, it was only a simple question that they have the reason to say what they want with regard to the technical aspects of the product, but they have used it to also make influence on the other aspects, including the innovation, the operational parts, etc. So I believe that it's a good reason that if we have the problem that the market is not educated with regard to innovation procurement, but it's also the problem of the procurers. They're afraid of using innovation procurement, and this is making them to take such caution steps as in this case. I believe that a scheme which would enable a leading procurer to have wide powers to make decisions with regard to such innovation procurement would be most useful and should be introduced in multi-subject innovation procurement. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from Bernadette and is probably a question for all of you. And she says, I haven't seen much risk management in technical or administrative specifications of PCP tenders. In some rare cases, tenders are asked to write a section about risk management within project management or deliverables. What's your practical proposal to get risk management in a more prominent place in offer evaluation and implementation? I don't know who wants to start on this one.
Yeah, maybe we start with Ville and then go to Jan Bart, and again the same order.
Yes, thank you. My experience with PCP is that yes, the risk management approach or risk management perspective is not very visible there. What I have seen is quite, let's say, a narrow approach to risk management in terms of managing the project risks, which is related to how to manage the PCP project, how to, what happens if there's a change in staff, and, these kind of conventional risks with any project. Whereas the PCP itself is as I tried to argue earlier, it is about risk management and risk sharing as such, which relates to the novelty of the technology that is being developed and also the risks involved with the market becoming available for that product or not. So I would very much encourage setting also PCP projects in this kind of a larger view in terms of the risks involved there, not only the sort of technical nitty-gritty risks about how to go through the project itself, but rather the risks about the innovation itself and the outcomes of that innovation, and also how to move forward to the actual deployment stage. What is the risks? What is the risk involved for the suppliers if nothing happens after the PCP, which is one of the issues that has been quite widely debated as well, that it might be a disappointment if the procuring bodies are not seriously willing to also do follow-up deployment stage procurements. So I don't have a very sophisticated answer on how to do it, but I would really agree on this question that this is a very important topic to be further developed.
Thank you, Ville. Maybe Jan next, if he wants to reply.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very good question, very practical. Just to give you some observations from my organization, the City of Amsterdam. I think that we basically break up this problem in two phases or two compartments. One of them is that the offer evaluation and the risk management that comes with that is actually the responsibility of the buying organization itself. So not the parties that are actively subscribing to these tenders. And then the second part is the actual implementation, which is definitely a great deal part of the responsibility of the offering organization. So how do we do this in Amsterdam? Maybe you can recall from my presentation that we've got this lines of defense model. In the case we got a procuring body, which is the first line, or the business, which is actually doing the procurement. And then in the second line, we've got what we call a so-called tender board. And a tender board is a couple of people with buying skills and also technical skills that assess the actual request for proposal there, and also assess it on risk. So we take that very much as a responsibility for our own organization. And the second thing is on the implementation side, you can actually put in a demand on your on the people that are applying for the tender to give a thorough description of their project management approach and the actual risk standards that they adhere to. Like maybe you can recall from our presentation that we adhere to the ISO 31000 standard. You can put that in your contract and ask that for it, or ask for a similar standard, which is something that you can evaluate. I think that would be a practical way of dealing with this situation.
From our perspective, I believe that it should be added that innovation procurement has two major specifics, which are the different from the normal public procurement. First of all, you need a deeper dialogue with the market operator delivering the services or the products, the innovation products within innovation partnership, because first of all, you are the co-creators of the innovation. So it's not a typical situation when you only want to have the outcomes. You have to get involved. So you have to have a proper project manager on your site, which is understanding the process and the product. This is the first thing. The second thing is that you have to have a continuous dialogue with the market operator on the dialogue on the risk problems of the project. And you have to make a joint technical team which is conducting the project. And the first thing, the practical solution, is that usually in innovation procurement, you have several market operators involved on different phases of the product. You have this pyramid when you have just eliminating different tenders on each part of it. But you can make also a joint meeting of all of the tenderers, introducing some safeguards with regard to the confidential information flow between them. But you can make a joint meeting of all of the market operators to discuss the common for them risks, for example, relating to the value chain of the products, especially that you may not be aware of some problems, and some problems can be only recognized by some of the tenderers during the process. So it's also the flow of the information between them can be most valuable to manage risk and to avoid some problems with the process itself. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are coming to the end. We're a bit late, 10 minutes over time, so I would just quickly tell you something about the follow-up webinars that we have planned. You will see them here on 3 May, accessibility, on 4 May, sustainable infrastructure projects, 16 May, we have a follow-up webinar on a procurement of IE and European clauses, and 16th of June on work conditions. Additionally, we will also organize master classes on how to price the value of innovation in an innovation partnership. These will take place at 31st May, 7th June, and 21 of June. So the next slide, please. This webinar, the recordings will be sent to you, including the slides of the presentations today. But if you wait a little, it will also be made publicly available on our YouTube channel, where it can be rewatched as many times as you wish. And you can contact us through our website, through our LinkedIn group, or you can send an email to our functional mailbox. And then for now, I want to thank all the presenters for their presentation, for their time. And I wish you all a very good day. And by this, I close the webinar. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.